This is extremely good news for the Toronto Maple Leafs as Brad Treliving continues searching for top six help. We get a major report coming from an NHL insider revealing this one team is selling the perfect player for the Toronto Maple Leafs going into next season. We're going to break down all these reports, how they can acquire this player, and exactly where he fits within the Leafs lineup, and so much more later on this episode. Before we get into that, we're trying to reach our goal of 18,000 subscribers, just 81 away. If you guys are enjoying daily content around the NHL from the Toronto Maple Leafs all the way to the West Coast to the Vancouver Canucks, go down and hit that free subscribe button. It helps us out a ton, and in return, we'll give you updates from all around the league. Now, Darius, we know the Leafs are desperately looking to add top six talent, and we do get a report from a writer with the Boston Bruins, who is a reporter covering them for over a decade. Trade rumors continue to surround the Bruins. Korpisalo, who the Leafs really don't need, and Pavel Zacha's name consistently coming up. Now, there is one more name that's not on this, but we really want to dive in and talk on the piece that fits them the best, and that is, of course, Pavel Zacha. Now, looking at Zacha as center, a very good one, having a bit of a down year, but the Bruins sucked, and we love to hear that. What is your thoughts on Pavel Zacha currently going into next year, and do you think this is the perfect piece for Brad Treliving to go out going into next season?
I think that it could be close to the perfect piece. And if he's playing in a system that is better than what the Boston Bruins have going on right now, then he will be a pretty good player. I mean, listen, when Patrice Bergeron retired, everyone said the Bruins were cooked. And then out of nowhere, Pavel Zacha in the top six looked fantastic. And the Bruins had a historic season, an absolute fantastic season. And then even the season after that had another good season. So this is a player that can play in the Toronto Maple Leafs top six. Is it like the best option for them right now? It could be a very interesting option, I think, for Brad Treliving to look at. And I think Brad Treliving, like Brandon Carlo, likes to make these trades that nobody really sees coming. And then all of a sudden you're like, oh, that actually fits the team very well. So I think that it could make a lot of sense with Zacha being 28 as well, which is crazy to think. It feels like he's been in the league forever at this point. But with him being 28, you could fix a problem that you know you're going to have at some point, which is the second line center position, which isn't necessarily a problem right now. Tavares has, continued to prove people wrong. He is still a second line center, but maybe you move Tavares to the wing and, he can take faceoffs here and there because he's one of the best faceoff guys in the entire league. And Zacha plays that position in play because he is a little bit quicker. He's a pretty good two-way guy as well. And even last year in a awful season for the Boston Bruins, half a point a game player, which is not horrible. So I feel like he can bring that point production up a little bit by playing with the Toronto Maple Leafs, and they can fill, again, that void in the middle that is coming when John Tavares' contract expires, or even the last 2 years of it. You don't know exactly what's going to happen with his foot speed, which isn't necessarily, isn't always the greatest anyway. So that is something you have to figure out. So I feel like it does make a lot of sense for the Toronto Maple Leafs. Now, if you take a look at his contract, makes almost $5 million. The Leafs have to free up some cap space. But if you trade David Kemp and Kelly Yarncroke, you have enough cap space to make that work and a little bit more to open up some flexibility for yourself, and you accumulate cap space as the season goes on. So I think that it could make a lot of sense. It might be an easier to a degree deal to make than going out and getting a Brian Rust, let's say, because Kyle Dubas is going to want to take everything from you at this point because he knows the Leafs prospects. So could be an easier trade in that way. And I wonder if he actually fits the Maple Leafs a little bit better playing that center position, being, a guy that maybe Craig Berube can rely upon defensively a little bit more. And that could free up Austin Matthews, who has been playing well defensively. So I think that's a very interesting option. And again, he's a younger option. He's a big body up the middle. Could make a lot of sense, but we'll see. We'll see what happens. We'll see what Craig Berube has up his sleeve. And it's the salary for me that's the biggest thing. I think it works versus going out and getting a $7 or $8 million player to play the wing.
And I think the big thing is looking at this Leafs team, you said it perfectly. When looking down the middle, John Tavares is still one of the best centers in the NHL, not the fastest player, still elite on the draw and scoring 39 goals last year. He has been everything you want, but we see a lot of guys as they get older, as they lose their speed, they transition into more of a winger style. Tavares can still take centers, but he could still be very serviceable as a winger in this top six, and it kind of spreads out. You'd have two centers on one line to play on either side, or to take draws if someone's thrown out. But the biggest thing with bringing in Pavel Zacha is one, very good on the faceoff, 52% last season. Not the most physical last season, but the Bruins probably weren't playing with much heart. And listen, Bruins fans, I'm sorry, I'm not trying to rag on you, but I'm still not over to 3-1. But besides the point, the biggest thing is fitting this into the lineup is very easy. Yes, you need to move out someone like Kemp or Yarncroke, but 4.7 for someone that's still only 28 years old, having 2 years left on his deal. I think there's a lot to like within this organization getting Zacha in. Yes, you can't really play him as a third line center. Yes, Tavares can eventually move down, but adding Zacha to this, and the Bruins probably don't want to trade with the Leafs too much. They got Carlo, they worked the deal out. There's a new regime in this group with Brad Treliving taking over a few years ago. Darius, looking at this, we already know we traded Fraser Minton and picks to bring in someone like Carlo. Would you be fine for moving on from Easton Cowan or Ben Danford to get Zacha within this lineup?
No, not Easton Cowan. There's a couple untouchables, I think, with the Toronto Maple Leafs. And I use that word a little bit loosely in this case, because obviously if there were a trade opportunity that came up that was Easton Cowan for Sidney Crosby, you probably take a look at that. But this is not Sidney Crosby. This is Pavel Zacha. So I think Ben Danford, what the Toronto Maple Leafs are planning to do with him, and Easton Cowan for that matter, I wouldn't be too quick to trade them. I think that you really, you've put so much time, so much effort, so much resources into developing them that you probably want to see it through at this point, unless it's something that completely blows you away. And I don't know if Pavel Zacha is that. That being said, the Toronto Maple Leafs, if you're the Boston Bruins, have a lot of other prospects like a Fraser Minton, for example, that can make a difference at the NHL level. And we're looking at, the Leafs just signed William Villanova as well. He's another defenseman that I think is going to touch some NHL time, if not this year, probably next year. And in the future, I think they think very highly of him. So he's another prospect that I think could be interesting for the Boston Bruins. They have a couple guys. They also have goaltenders that are coming up through the Marlies as well that could interest the Bruins, especially if they're going to trade Korpisalo, which hasn't worked out too well for them. So that's another interesting option there as well. So no, I wouldn't be too quick to trade those guys. Of course, the Bruins fans will be salivating at the idea of that. Fraser Minton's going to be a great player for them. They got him for Brandon Carlo, obviously. This makes a ton of sense, I think, for the Toronto Maple Leafs if they shift the lineup around a little bit, and then you don't spend too much on a top six forward. And the other thing, like you brought up, I think that it might cost a little bit more. Maybe you are talking about an Easton Cowan. I don't think you pull the trigger on that, but the reason you're talking about him is because it comes with term. And that was a big thing with Brandon Carlo as well. And some other players around the league, like I brought up Rickard Rakell and Brian Rust, they have term on their contracts. That's attractive to a lot of teams. With the salary cap rising and guys on expiring deals going to be making a lot more than we originally thought. So I think that could be very attractive as well.
And I mean, it's going to get very interesting. Now, there is one more name floating around Boston, and that is Casey Mittelstadt. We've seen the reports coming out when Charlie Coyle was traded to Colorado. They weren't too keen on taking Mittelstadt back as the main piece. The prospect they got and the pick was what attracted the Bruins to make the trade. So with his name being thrown around, with his season last year not being the best, the biggest problem with Mittelstadt, in my opinion, is almost $6 million for a guy that hasn't really hit what he was supposed to be, a former 8th overall pick by the Buffalo Sabres. I don't know what they're doing with that franchise, but they didn't hit on Casey Mittelstadt right now, and we'll do this real quickly. Is this an intriguing name? 2 years younger than Pavel Zacha, hasn't hit his potential, but there is still wiggle room, a former top 10 pick. Would you like to see him in the Leafs organization if he comes at a cheaper cost than Zacha, or would you rather just kind of pay up and bring in the name that is already doing something?
So yes, he comes in at a cheaper price, but to me, and the short answer is no, this doesn't fit the Toronto Maple Leafs. And the long answer is he just doesn't fit the system. He's a smaller player, and I think the Leafs are trying to, not sacrificing skill or anything like that, but they're trying to get bigger and they're trying to get harder to play against. And I think that Mittelstadt is an interesting option up the middle, and he's a great playmaker, right? And maybe he could set up a guy like William Nylander. That could make a lot of sense. But I think stylistically, in terms of how they want to play, if you've watched the Boston Bruins games, and if you watch the Bruins versus the Leafs series a couple of years ago, Pavel Zacha can be a difference maker in the way that the Leafs want to play. So I think that he's a better fit in that way if we're comparing them. But again, they're different players. And I think Casey Mittelstadt is a great player, but I think ultimately doesn't fit the Leaf system. And I think he would put up a lot of points, but when it comes to the playoffs, I don't know if he would fit in with what they're trying to accomplish.
And I think you said it perfectly. I think you go to get someone like Zacha, who I think was 26th or 27th in Selke voting last season. What's your guys' thoughts on this go? Would you go out to get Pavel Zacha? Would you rather go out and get a winger and let Tavares continue to age at the center position? Go down and let us know down below. While you're down there, leave a like, subscribe, share this with your friends. Once again, we're trying to reach a goal of 18,000. So go down and hit that free subscribe button. It helps out a bunch. And we enjoy putting the content out for you guys. But that'd be it for this episode. I've been your host, Mark, with my co-host, Darius, and take care.